On my 7th day of tutoring Chris, I had a dream about the future. In the dream, 2 years from now, Chris grabs my wrist, pins me against the desk, and kisses me like there's no tomorrow. When I woke up, I had no idea how to even bring this up to Chris. Especially since he was just telling his friends, in that cold way of his, I hate Sarah. If every other woman on earth died, I still wouldn't like her. Chapter 1. The first time I met Chris, I knew he was a troublemaker. I was standing at the front door of the mansion, knocking. Hello? I'm the new tutor. No answer. The door was slightly ajar, so I pushed it open. By the time I realized something was wrong, it was too late. A bucket of water came crashing down, soaking me completely. Then, I heard the wild laughter of some teenagers. Look, she fell for it. Chloe, that was a great idea. The girl named Chloe lifted her head, proud as a peacock. But she didn't pay attention to anyone. She just looked up at the second floor. Chris, was that awesome or what? A guy was standing on the second floor. I have to admit, I'd never seen such a gorgeous guy. Pale, handsome. When he looked down, there was this mischievous glint in his eyes. His thin lips curled up coldly and he said, boring. Chapter 2. Are you Chris? I asked. Yeah. Are those your friends? Yeah. I pulled out a tissue and wiped my face. I'm the new live-in tutor your dad just hired. My name is Sarah. You can call me Ms. Young or Sarah, whichever you prefer. Chris let out a small scoff. It was like he didn't believe me. But I wasn't angry at all, even though my hair was still dripping. I walked steadily towards the stairs. The laughter around me stopped. What's going on? Why isn't she crying? Maybe she's in shock. Whoa, she's coming up here. The other tutors all got mad and left right away. I walked right up to Chris. Thanks for the welcome gift from you and your friends. I have a little surprise for you too. I unscrewed the lid of my thermos and dumped the whole thing on Chris's head. Every last drop. Chris was stunned. Chapter 3. It wasn't just Chris who was stunned. His little group of friends was speechless too. The whole mansion went silent. Chloe was the first to scream. Are you crazy? How dare you do that to Chris? Do you have any idea that the Chin family could crush a poor college student like you without a second thought? Oh, I almost forgot about you. I picked up my soaked canvas bag and swung it hard. It landed right on little Princess Chloe. I knew who she was. The heiress to the He Corporation, right? A perfect match for the Chin family and Chris's childhood friend. Rumor had it they might even get engaged. But none of that mattered to me. I was here to tutor, not to be a slave. If someone messed with me, I'd fight back. Chloe had never been treated like this before. She started yelling and screaming. So I just pulled out my phone and started recording. What are you doing? I'm going to show Mr. Chin who's interfering with his son's tutoring. Chloe shut up looking worried. She knew her family's business still needed the Chin family's support. She was afraid of Mr. Chin. If there's nothing else, I'm going to go put my luggage away. I turned to Chris. He was just like me now, his hair soaking wet, water dripping down. After 3 seconds of silence, his lips curled into a smile. What was your name again? Sarah. I won't forget it. You better not. Chapter 4. Chris was 4 years younger than me. He was a total slacker. He scored a total of 250 on his college entrance exams. A score that pretty much matched his personality. Mr. Chin wanted to send him abroad, so he was looking for a top-notch tutor to help him with his English. At first, he hired foreign tutors. But Chris was such a mess that he drove them all away. Reluctantly, the job finally fell to me. Even though I was still a student, I was the top scorer in English on my college entrance exams. And I was the top student in my English major. It was summer vacation and they wouldn't let us stay in the dorms. To make it easier to tutor him, every day, I had to move in and live with Chris. In the afternoon, I walked past Chris's game room. The door wasn't completely closed. I could clearly hear the conversation inside. Chris, your new tutor is kind of interesting. She's pretty cute too, hee hee. Are you blind? Chloe sounded really annoyed. She's just dripping with cheapness. That's not cute. Yeah, She's nothing compared to Miss Chloe. I bet she won't even last a month. Chris, who hadn't said anything until now, suddenly spoke up. I bet 3 days. Chapter 5. I soon found out why Chris was so confident. He really had come up with a terrible idea. The next evening, as planned, I went to Chris's room to find him for our lesson. He wasn't at his desk, but I could hear the shower running in the bathroom. Are you taking a shower? I asked. Yeah, I'll be right out. I'll come back later then. Wait, Chris said, unusually polite. I forgot my towel. It's on the bed. Could you please hand it to me? He stuck his hand out from the crack in the door. I noticed that his pinky finger was limp, like it was broken. I didn't think much of it and turned to grab the towel. This gray one? Here you go. Before I could even finish my sentence, Chris suddenly grabbed my wrist. He yanked me straight into the bathroom. The bathroom was filled with steam. Chris was shirtless, with just a towel loosely wrapped around his waist. He wasn't even 20 yet, but he was at that age where he loved all kinds of sports. So, even though he didn't have a habit of working out, he still had a lean, muscular build. The lines of his body were almost too good to be true. I was a little dazed by the sight of him. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The housekeeper said, "Young master, the fruit is ready. Shall I bring it in?" I instantly understood Chris's plan. You deliberately told the housekeeper to bring the fruit now, so she'd catch me barging into the bathroom, right? Chris said, "You're smart. The housekeeper will tell your parents, and then they'll replace me." That's right. Do you like this second gift? Thank you, I love it. Chris smiled, thinking his plan had worked. But the next second, I reached out and touched his muscles. Then I won't be polite. Chapter 6. Chris was completely stunned. He hadn't expected this at all. My fingertips gently traced his skin, from his chest all the way down. Along with the water droplets that hadn't dried yet, they slid to his abs, then to his V-line. My fingernails occasionally grazed his skin, and Chris would reflexively shiver. A young man's body has a unique leanness, but it doesn't lack the strength of a grown man. It was a perfect kind of sexy. Below the V-line, the towel was wrapped. With a little bit of force, the towel would fall off. Chris was still in shock, but his body was already giving honest feedback. Like his ears, which were red as blood. And then under the towel, "Chris, do you need me to get you a fresh towel?" My voice was very soft, like a feather brushing against him. Just then, the housekeeper outside got impatient. "Young master, are you not in the room? Shall I come in?" "Don't come in," Chris blurted out. The housekeeper had just pushed the bedroom door open a crack, but she quickly closed it. "Then I'll leave the fruit by the door. I'll go back to my work." The sound of her footsteps faded away. Only then did I let go of him, my expression turning cold again. Trying to mess with me? Did you really think I was that naive? Chapter 7. After that battle, Chris's annoyance with me reached its peak. He was annoyed for a lot of reasons. For example, he'd shot himself in the foot. And also, I'd pulled away so quickly, leaving him standing there, looking foolish. I even heard him say to his friends, I didn't know which type of girl I hated the most before. Now I know, it's the Sarah type. Calling me arrogant? Get lost. If every other woman on earth died, I still wouldn't like her. Luckily, he calmed down for a few days and didn't bother me. The unexpected happened on the 7th night. I went to sleep as usual, but I had a very strange dream. In the dream, there was another me being pinned to a desk by Chris. The same desk where I tutored him every day. He was unbuttoning my shirt with one hand. His other hand, it's not easy to describe. Sarah, I've wanted to do this for 2 years, he said, his breath heavy and full of desire. Kiss me, please? I watched all of this, dumbfounded. There was a calendar on the desk. The date was April 2026. 2 years from now. Could it be? I was dreaming of the future? The scene shifted, and the time was August 2026. The setting changed to a bed. 20-year-old Chris had an even better physique than he did now. The dim light illuminated the rhythm of their movements. Sweat dripped from his forehead. Sarah, look at me. I'm your good boy. Please don't leave me again, okay? He pleaded, as devout as a believer. I couldn't bear to watch such a steamy scene. I woke up with a start.
My heart was pounding in my chest.
It was just a dream, it's okay. I reassured myself and tried to put the dream out of my mind. Chapter 8. Chris usually slept until noon, but the next morning, I was surprised to find him sitting on the couch at 8 a.m., just staring blankly. He had dark circles under his eyes. He clearly hadn't slept well. I greeted him casually. Up early? He jumped up from the couch as if he'd seen a ghost. You? Spit it out. I will never like you, and I will never call you Sarah. Weirdo. I sized him up. His tongue was tied. His ears were bright red. He wasn't acting like his usual arrogant self. Something was off. I tossed a dictionary at him. If you're bored, go memorize some vocabulary. For the next few days, I kept having dreams about what seemed to be the future. And they were all related to Chris. The 2026 me had a respectable job, wearing a white blouse and a pencil skirt every day. Dream Chris seemed to really like that outfit. He always slowly unbuttoned my shirt. Sometimes with his hands, sometimes with his teeth. Then he'd slowly kiss the exposed skin. In contrast, in reality, Chris avoided me like the plague. He even pretended to be sick to skip our lessons, taking several days off in a row. Lies often enough, and they may come true. This weekend, Chris got his wish, and actually fell ill. He had a high fever of 102 degrees Fahrenheit, was delirious, and couldn't get out of bed. The housekeeper happened to be off today, so it was just the two of us in the mansion. For safety's sake, I called Mr. Chen. Before I could even finish describing his condition, Mr. Chen interrupted me. Just let him lie there for a few days. You don't need to report his illnesses to me in the future. I was stunned. Aren't you going to take him to the hospitals? There's no need. I heard a nice shot in the background. Mr. Chen was playing golf. I said, then, maybe you could come see him after you're done playing? I'm very busy, Mr. Chen said politely, but distantly. Ms. Yang, just let him fend for himself. How can I do that? He's not my only son. As the most useless one, I've already been patient enough with him. I was suddenly at a loss for words. Did you see the broken finger on his left hand? Mr. Chen suddenly asked. Yes, I broke it. Chapter 9. What? I almost lost my voice. When Chris was little, he lied and said he was sick to trick me into coming home to see him. I'm so busy. How could I have time to play these little games with him? So, I broke his pinky finger to teach him a lesson. Mr. Chen's laughter revealed his pride. After that, he behaved himself and never lied like that again. It's just a little finger. It doesn't affect his life. Look, he's still alive and kicking, isn't he? A chill ran through me.
I think I understood now.
Why Chris had such a terrible personality. Growing up in this kind of environment, it's a wonder he wasn't even more messed up. I stood at the doorway of his room, looking at the suffering Chris. I felt like I was seeing my younger self. I was just like him. No one cared. Stumbling and fumbling, figuring out how to grow up alone. I decided to get him a glass of water and tell him to take his medicine. Chris's face was flushed with fever today. He looked kind of cute. I couldn't help but reach out and pinch his cheek. It felt good, soft, like one of those squishy toys. Chris let out a small groan, but he didn't resist. Maybe he didn't have the strength. After he took his medicine, I was satisfied and let go, ready to leave. Chris suddenly grabbed me. Sarah, what did you just call me? Had his brain fried? Didn't he say he'd never call me Sarah? Then, Chris leaned his whole head on my shoulder, his breath hot. What year is it? Sarah, are you in my dream again? If you're not going to talk, do you want to feel my 102-degree body directly? As he spoke, he took my hand and placed it on the hottest part of his body. Chapter 10. The burning heat in my palm instantly brought me back to reality. Without a doubt, I wasn't the only one having dreams about the future. Chris was dreaming too. It was just that right now he was so feverish that he thought he was still in a dream. I quickly pulled my hand away and gave him 2 slaps. Very light, not painful at all. Mainly to wake him up. Chris woke up. Just now you mistook reality for a dream. Oh, it's 2024, not 2026. He suddenly widened his eyes. How do you know I dreamed about 2026? Because I dreamed about it too. That's impossible. The desk, the rug, and this bed, except the bedding was gray. I was describing the scenes from my dream. Chris finally believed me. Then why didn't you say anything sooner?
Say what?
I asked him back. Say that in the future, you might be begging for my love. Chris choked. I wasn't wrong. In the dream, wasn't he the one being humble and proactive? Thinking of those scenes, Chris's heart pounded like a drum, and his body felt another wave of heat. He grabbed the blanket, covered his lower body, and said with feigned arrogance, Sarah, I didn't take those dreams seriously. Dreams are fake. They can't come true. I advise you not to have any wishful thinking. Funny, I wasn't. I deliberately glanced at the place covered by the blanket and gave a knowing smile. Chapter 11. Chris and I reached an agreement. We'd pretend those dreams never happened. I was still just the tutor. He was my employer. At the end of July, some uninvited guests arrived at the house. Chris's brothers. They brought a bunch of friends, saying they were here to celebrate Chris's birthday. Chris's birthday was actually tomorrow. The three brothers came empty-handed. They treated the birthday cake like a toy, throwing it around. I heard from the housekeeper that these brothers came once a month. Every time they came, they made a mess of the house, making life difficult for the housekeeper and the cleaners. Chris really disliked them. His face was gloomy all night. Before long, the guests got drunk. A female companion leaned on the eldest brother, Ryan's, shoulder and said coquettishly, Your younger brother is quite handsome. Ryan's face darkened. All looks, no substance. He's useless. He said this while Chris was right there. He didn't care about his brother's feelings at all. Honey, do you know what he scored on his college entrance exams? How much? 250. Exactly 250. Everyone burst into laughter. No wonder Mr. Chen isn't letting him inherit the family business. So, what if he's the legitimate son? He still has to make way for us. I knew something about Mr. Chen's private life. He had only one child with his wife, and that was Chris. But before Chris was born, Mr. Chen had been playing the field. He had a bunch of illegitimate children before he had Chris. Chris's mother was so angry that she developed breast cancer and eventually died from it. As soon as his mother died, these brothers barged in. Like robbers, they took Chris's things and bullied him. Mr. Chen initially tried to restrain them. Later, his mistresses would whine and complain, and he wouldn't bother anymore. The jokes got worse and worse. Ryan, completely letting loose, said, Genetics are powerful. Chris is just like his mother, a loser. Chris's pupils constricted, and he instantly clenched his fist. No doubt, that fist was meant for Ryan. But before he could strike, I slapped him. Didn't your father teach you how to be a human being? Chapter 12. Ryan was stunned by me. I didn't give him a chance to curse at me. I grabbed his hair and shoved his face into the cake. The scene immediately became chaotic. The female companion screamed. Big brother, are you okay? Chris's other two brothers were verbally anxious, but they didn't move. They just watched Ryan coldly. Ryan finally reacted. Are you too blind? Help me pull her off. But, big brother, men and women shouldn't touch each other. And what about when you fool around? Don't you say that then. She's the tutor Dad hired after all. Ryan was speechless and turned his anger on me. Just a tutor. How dare you do this to me? I'll make you regret this. Fine, I said, holding up my phone. I recorded everything you just said insulting Chris's mother. I don't mind sending it to your father and the media. Your father may be a scumbag, but he's very shrewd. He's always tried to portray himself as a kind entrepreneur in front of the public. Guess what would happen if this video got out? His illegitimate son insulting his wife and son. What would happen? A flicker of fear flashed in Ryan's eyes. He pushed me away and quickly ran to the door. I won't bother with you today. He quickly got into his car and fled. The other two brothers, after watching the show, also left satisfied. The living room became quiet again. I turned to Chris. What are you staring at? Chris finally reacted. Thank you. Don't thank me. I didn't do it entirely to help you. I looked at the portrait of Mrs. Lee on the cabinet. She was beautiful and kind. I won't allow anyone to insult her.
Chris was surprised.
You knew my mother? She sponsored me. I wasn't lying. Mrs. Lee died early, but she left a fund to help poor girls who couldn't afford to go to school. I was one of the girls who received that sponsorship. When the Chun family contacted me, saying they wanted me to tutor Chris, I agreed without hesitation, partly because of this. Chris asked, weren't you afraid Ryan would expose your lie? You mean about recording? I smiled. Yes, I hadn't recorded any evidence at all. Everything happened so suddenly. No one could have predicted it. If Ryan had been a little calmer, he would have figured it out. I had no chance to record a video. Luckily, he was a fool. And his thinking ability was eroded by alcohol, leaving him only with a guilty conscience and cowardice. It doesn't matter if he believes it or not. What matters is that he realizes that we are not to be trifled with. Chris was stunned for a moment. We? Yes, I repeated firmly. We. Chapter 13. Those two words, we, struck a chord with Chris. I noticed it from day one, he murmured. You're really bold. I'm not bold. I'm just not afraid to die. My life isn't worth much anyway. They can take it if they want. I rolled up my sleeves and started cleaning up the cream on the floor. Chris obediently came over to help. We put aside our prejudices for a rare moment and started talking. Are you just going to keep letting them bully you? Dad doesn't like me. There's nothing I can do. Yes, there is.
What?
You turn it around and bully them. Sarah, are you kidding me? I'm not kidding, I said seriously. After getting to know you this past month, I've realized you're smart. If you want to learn, you can always pick it up quickly. You did poorly on your exams before on purpose, didn't you? You wanted to get your father's attention that way. I hit the nail on the head. Chris opened his mouth to argue, but he couldn't say a word.
There's no need for that, Chris.
You're not alive to make other people like you. You should work hard and snatch everything your dad has from him. Let the old man retire. Let the old man be unemployed. Let the old man live by the expression on your face. I was like a treacherous minister egging on a prince to seize the throne. But Chris seemed moved by what I said. I struck while the iron was hot. And what about your little group of friends? Where were they when you needed them most? When you were being bullied by Ryan and those guys, did they dare to publicly stand with you like I did? That was the truth. Chris's eyes flickered, and he asked, then what about you? Why do you dare? Because I empathize with you. Chris didn't say anything for a long time. Cicadas were chirping outside the window. The heat of summer turned into ambition, swelling within the young man's body. Mrs. Lee, your son has gone a little astray. I've given him a nudge. Consider it repaying your kindness. Chapter 14. After cleaning up the room, it was almost midnight.
Chris yawned.
I'm so sleepy. I'm going to bed. I have to get up early tomorrow to memorize vocabulary. Wait. I stopped him. I have something for you.
What?
Please don't tell me it's the new version of the dictionary. I ran back to my room and brought out a gift box. Happy birthday. Chris was instantly stunned. I feel like you don't need anything, so I just made you a small charm. Don't mind it. The charm was shaped like a birthday cake, but it was lopsided and ugly. Looking at all the crooked stitches, I coughed. My skills are limited. Don't mind it. The cake for today was ruined. I didn't think there would be any cake. Chris lowered his head and smiled. His eyes were wet. It's been a long time since I received a gift. I really like it. Thank you. He was already good-looking. When he was about to cry, he had this damn broken feeling. Chris met my gaze. His eyelashes fluttered. What are you looking at? Chris, you're really good-looking. The atmosphere suddenly changed. Chris's ears turned red again. I don't know how long it was. Perhaps wanting to stop my gaze. Or perhaps simply thinking of nothing. Chris suddenly lowered his head and kissed me cautiously. Chapter 15. After his 19th birthday, Chris was like a different person. He studied very hard. He was like a sponge, voraciously absorbing the knowledge he had missed. He really stopped hanging out with that group of friends. Sometimes Chloe came looking for him. Did that tutor of yours give you some kind of love potion? Before she could finish speaking, Chris closed the door on her. I don't have a marriage agreement with Chloe, he said out of the blue.
Oh,
I gave him a strange look. Why are you explaining that? I don't want you to misunderstand. I don't like her, and I've never thought about being with her. Just explain it, you don't need to use your mouth. Chris held the back of my head and kissed me intimately. Ever since that kiss on his birthday night, Chris was out of control. He became addicted to kissing me, finding all sorts of reasons to kiss me. I did pretty well on the practice test, right? That's not a reason to use your mouth. The young man's dark eyes were deep, filled with desire. He gently caressed my lip with his fingertip. Sarah, be with me, okay? Like an incubus. That description popped into my head.
no one could refuse Chris like that.
I grabbed onto a shred of reason and pushed him away. We'll talk about it later. Chapter 16. I wasn't deliberately playing hard to get with Chris. I just felt that he and I were not from the same world. The gap between us was too big. He was just caught up in the moment, probably just driven by impulse. That kind of impulse that young people have. He didn't care about reality, but I did. As for those dreams that seemed to be about the future, maybe they were just dreams. I knew very well that one day we would return to our respective paths. I just didn't expect that day to come so quickly. At the end of August, Mr. Chin found out about me beating up Ryan. He was his son, after all. I was fired. However, Mr. Chin made a request. Don't tell Chris that I was fired. In exchange, he would recommend an internship for me. This was a rare opportunity at a large company I had long admired. Out of curiosity, I asked Mr. Chin, why hide it? He replied, Chris is very dependent on you now. If he knew I fired you, he might try to take me down with him. You think too impulsively of him. He's my son. I know him best. After a pause, Mr. Chin said, separating you now is the best time, before he falls too deeply. So, he knew everything. Nothing could escape his eyes. He let me choose. Was there even a need to consider it? I decisively accepted the internship offer. I was very calm on the day I left. I finished explaining the last exam point to Chris. Then I closed the book and said, let's stop here. Chris didn't notice anything, yawning as he went to bed. After he fell asleep, I quietly closed the door, dragging my old suitcase, stepping onto the path that belonged to my life. Chapter 17. The job that Mr. Chin introduced me to was in City C. It was a Fortune 500 company, a truly rare opportunity. I was excited like I was on drugs. Working hard, constantly accumulating experience. Except for my graduation defense, I hardly ever returned to City A. In the blink of an eye, 2 years had passed. I returned to City A because of a job change. I resigned from that big company. I jumped to a group under the Chin family, for no other reason than that the Chin family paid more. Life after the jump was also uneventful. Until that Friday, our department went to University A to hold a recruitment fair. Before the start, I was sitting backstage playing a game. It seemed like someone had come outside. The colleagues at the door were greeting them enthusiastically. I casually asked, who is it? My partner in the game said, the boss's son, Ryan Chen or Lishui Chen or the youngest one, Chris Chen. I froze. Partner, hey? Hey? Use your skills. You're going to get killed. Chris Chen. Didn't he go abroad?
Who knows what happened?
They said they were sending him abroad, but the young master suddenly changed his mind, took another year to study for the college entrance exams, and actually got into University A. Partner marveled. Isn't it amazing? I thought he was a hopeless slacker, but now he's the apple of the boss's eye. Quick, stop playing. He's coming in. I subconsciously looked up. That figure was so familiar that my heart skipped a beat. Chapter 18.
Chris didn't see me.
He just walked to the door and greeted the supervisor. He had grown taller in the 2 years since I had seen him. His eyebrows were much more calm. He was becoming more and more like the Chris Chun in my dreams. After the recruitment fair, my colleagues and I were responsible for cleaning up. They were chatting about Chris's gossip. Have you heard about the young master's scandal? Which one? Which one? It is said that he likes a girl, and he is so single-minded and affectionate. Well, Rickshaw Boy said that love will only be found in rich families. Is it Chloe he? I heard they were childhood sweethearts, a perfect match. My hand stopped for a moment, and I listened in silence. I also heard it was Chloe he. A few days ago, Chloe he posted a photo of holding hands on Weibo. Someone said it was with Chris. Listening, I got distracted. So much so that I didn't notice that the colleagues behind me had suddenly become silent. Could you please give me a cable tie? I said, looking down. For a long time, no one responded. I belatedly looked up. I saw Chris holding a whole bundle of cable ties. Standing behind me. Chapter 19. My colleagues were very good at reading the room and shut their mouths. Chris twirled the cable ties, hitting them against his palm, one by one. The sound was beating against his heart and mine. You deigned to come back? His tone was casual. Long time no see. Thank you for still remembering me, Ms. Yang. He stressed the last 4 words. He had never used that title 2 years ago. Now he would call me that. I forced myself to say, congratulations on getting into university, eh? Chris let out a soft chuckle. If 2 years ago, he was just a mischievous troublemaker. Then now, he was more mature, and the evil spirit between his eyebrows was heavier. I stood up, supporting myself on my knees. Chris caught sight of my clothes. A white, professional shirt. Certain dreams were recalled. His gaze became deep, obscure, and unpredictable. My colleague pulled me over and asked in a super low voice, Sarah, do you know Christian? I used to tutor him, but the atmosphere between you two doesn't seem very pleasant. I pursed my lips. Maybe I was too strict when I was teaching him. My colleague didn't suspect anything. Don't worry about that for now. Let's go to dinner tonight to celebrate the successful recruitment fair. Okay, everyone echoed. Just then, a colleague asked, Young master, do you want to join us? The other colleagues wanted to kick him, saying, why are you asking such nonsense? People still have classes. That's right, young master is very busy. Not busy. Chris curled his lips into a smile, glancing at me. Coincidentally, I don't have classes tonight. The dinner party, but with an ancestor. Everyone was cautious and didn't dare to say anything wrong. Finally, a drunk colleague, unafraid of death, hooked his arm around Chris's shoulder. Young master, just call me Chin. Chin, you're a really good person. No wonder you were able to reverse the situation and get into university. Seeing you today has really changed my perception. We all broke out into a sweat for this colleague. But Chris wasn't angry. Instead, he politely said, thank you, Brother Wang. His conversation was like a different person. Sobering. But the smile on his face was always faint, as if there was a layer of gauze that you couldn't see through. Hick. Chin. I heard you're getting married soon. Let me congratulate you in advance. I'm still single. How could I be getting married soon? Huh? Didn't you and that young lady from the He family take a picture of holding hands and make it official? Chris raised his eyebrows in surprise. I've completely lost contact with her. How could I take a picture with her? Oh, so it's a misunderstanding. Brother Wang smiled awkwardly. But Chern, you're so eligible. There must be many girls chasing you at school, right? I don't know. I don't really pay attention to that. Chris suddenly looked up and gave me a gentle smile. Ms. Yang, didn't you tell everyone? My first kiss was with you. Chapter 20. The dinner table was terrifyingly quiet. Even someone as thick-skinned as me wanted to find a hole to crawl into. Brother Wang instantly sobered up. He chuckled awkwardly. Did I hear something I shouldn't have? See, even the outgoing one couldn't handle the situation. After that, the colleagues all found excuses to leave early. No, to escape. It was just Chris and me left. He calmly peeled shrimp as if nothing had happened. Chris's fingers were beautiful, pale, long. He peeled the shrimp and put them in my bowl. I said helplessly, Why did you say that just now? Everyone will misunderstand. Misunderstand what? I said the truth. That's ancient history. No need to tell our colleagues. You don't like it? Not really. Funny. He looked up. I also don't like that you left without saying goodbye and disappeared. We're even. So, you deliberately made me uncomfortable today? He didn't answer, which was equivalent to admitting it. I stopped talking too, because leaving without saying goodbye was the truth. I was in the wrong first, so what was there to argue about? I don't know how long it was. Chris spoke. I know the old man fired you. It wasn't your own decision, but the result is the same. It's not the same. Chris shook his head. The point I'm angry about is that you didn't discuss it with me and made the decision yourself. I choose my own path. I don't need to discuss it with you. Why? The gap between us is too big. We're not from the same world. And in what capacity would you participate in my decisions? Chris's face suddenly turned cold. I was reminding him that we were never together from beginning to end. I continued, for example, today, if you hadn't seen me, we wouldn't have had any interaction at all. We wouldn't have met. But I saw you. No matter where you are, I will spare no effort to see you. Chris's deep voice struck my eardrums. So, we will be seeing each other often in the future. Sarah, be prepared. Chapter 21. Chris soon proved with his actions that he wasn't kidding. Our team had a new project, and we were temporarily notified by the supervisor that Chris would be joining us. I don't know how he managed to get the opportunity. Had Mr. Chen really changed his mind and decided to cultivate him? Although Chris was only a freshman because he had been held back and repeated a year, he was already 21. He could fully participate in the project. The supervisor said meaningfully, Sarah, you're the team leader. Be patient with him. Me. Fortunately, Chris wasn't a slacker at work at all. His ability was outstanding, completely exceeding expectations. He also never used his identity to demand special treatment. Over time, everyone let down their guard and got along with him very well. When the project was about to be finalized, our team invited the client to dinner. That day, I happened to have a proposal to work on and stayed at the company to work overtime. That's how the accident happened. At 10 o'clock at night, my colleague, Ellie, suddenly called me. Team leader, something bad happened. Chris got into a fight with the client. What? My first reaction was that Chris wasn't that impulsive. Team leader, it's not really Chris's fault. The reason he hit him was because of you. I saved the proposal, grabbed my bag, and rushed to the restaurant. On the way, Ellie explained the cause and effect. The client's representative this time was a greasy, lecherous, middle-aged man. During the meal, he got drunk and asked, "Why didn't your Sarah come?" The team leader stayed at the company to work overtime today. How can that be? I came here for her. If she's here, it'll be easier to talk. At this point, my colleagues had already sensed something was wrong and tried to protect me. It's the same if you talk to us. The project content remains unchanged. The client's representative waved his hand. I only want Sarah. I rarely see girls like her. She's not only beautiful, but her eyes are cold when she looks at people, but there's also a charm to them. When she looks at me, my whole body goes weak. Call Sarah. If she keeps me happy today, the project will be, ouch. Before he could finish speaking, Chris's fist had already landed. The scene immediately spiraled out of control, and my colleagues had no choice but to call me. When I arrived, the private room was already a mess. Chapter 22. Chris didn't know that my colleagues had called me. Just like I didn't know what Chris was thinking at this moment, he was in a towering rage, like a giant beast that had lost its mind. The client representative was bald and huddled in the corner, his snot running down his face in fear. How can you hit people? I'm going to terminate the cooperation and report you to Mr. Chen. Go ahead. Chris was unusually calm, but the calmer he was, the more terrifying he seemed. The other people the client brought were stunned and didn't mean to step forward to stop him. Or perhaps they were also dissatisfied with the bald man. Chris approached step by step. His mind was full of Sarah. It was her smile, her frown, her anger, every detail of her. and the softness of her lips. Chris had realized long ago that he had an excessive possessiveness toward Sarah. Once he thought of Sarah standing next to other men, smiling at others, frowning at others, being angry at others. A violent urge would arise in Chris's heart. The urge to destroy everyone. Sarah was sometimes close and sometimes far away, like a goddess. He wished he could prostrate himself at her feet and kiss her toes. What right did these dirty men have to covet her? 2 years of growth had made Chris more stable and better at disguising himself. But no one knew that he was terrifyingly extreme only when it came to Sarah. The bald man, however, was still provoking him. Do you like that, girls? You should have said so earlier. I'll just play with her for a while, and then I'll give her back to you. Play? Damn it. He really deserved to die. Chris didn't say a word, bent down to pick up a broken piece of glass from a wine bottle. Then he raised his arm high. Suddenly, someone called out to him.
Chris.
That voice pierced through the chaos and helped him regain a trace of reason. Then, the owner of the voice rushed over. She grabbed his other hand. She lowered her head and kissed his palm. Chris, calm down. I'm here. Chris was stunned. The touch of her lips electrified him, making him shiver and dizzy. Sarah held his fingers tightly, as if to lock the kiss in his palm. Good boy, stop. Chris received the command. He dropped the broken glass bottle. He lowered his eyes and said obediently, I'll listen to you. Chapter 23. My colleague stayed behind to handle the aftermath, and I escorted Chris home. I originally planned to take him back to the university, but it was already getting late, and the dorms were closing. In the end, I drove him back to that villa. It had been 2 years since I last came here, and the layout and decorations hadn't changed at all. Thanks for your hard work today. Go take a shower and get some sleep, I said. Aren't you mad at me? He asked. What for? I countered. You were just being impulsive to protect me. It wasn't the right thing to do, but no matter what, I can't blame someone who's trying to protect me. Chris seemed to relax, his head hanging down as it rested on my shoulder. Sorry. It's fine. We can talk about the project again. I know you're really looking forward to the project. I'll make up for the gap. I patted his back. I'm excited about the bonus, but that doesn't mean I'm willing to be disrespected. Chris shifted his head, feeling a little uncomfortable. He leaned closer, brushing his lips against my neck carefully. After a few attempts, realizing I wasn't pulling away, he cupped my face and deepened the kiss. This kiss was more passionate than before, stronger, more intense. Without noticing, my back was pressed against the desk, the same desk I once used to tutor him in English. Chris slid his hand down my body. Sis, when we were apart, I missed you so much. Did you ever think about me?
No.
He gave a little force to his grip. Tonight, no lying. I did. How did you think of me? His eyes were bright, full of temptation. Did you feel like this when you thought of me? What about you? I turned the question back to him. How did you think of me? He smiled, pulling my hand and guiding it toward himself. I thought about you while doing this. Luckily, the dim lighting hid my blushing face. Chris teased me for a while before asking, Is this okay? I nodded. He freed his other hand to undo the buttons on his white shirt. Sis, I've wanted to do this for 2 years. Will you kiss me? It was only then that I realized the calendar on the desk marked today, April 2026. The dream had turned real. Chapter 24. Chris didn't tire, pushing me further. At 21, he was full of energy. After hours of intense activity, he finally let go of me. As we were about to sleep, he eagerly asked, Sis, how did I do? Good, I replied. Immediately, he seemed eager to keep going. Thankfully, I managed to push him off just in time. Somehow, we ended up in a bed-buddy relationship. Chris was perfect in this role. Meanwhile, he worked hard to make up for the hole in the project. After offending the client representative, the company punished him, but he took full responsibility without involving any colleagues. He then found an old friend who was familiar with the other company. After several conversations, they agreed to replace the client representative and continue with the project. The new representative was a girl, only a few years older than me. On her first day, she came to apologize. That previous person was rude and insulted you. We should have apologized earlier, she said. I glanced at her business card and recognized her name. Did you receive sponsorship from Mrs. Lee? Yes. You too. I remember seeing your name on the list. It was nice to know that we both had our own lives and careers. The project negotiations went smoothly, and I received my bonus. Spring passed and summer came. In August, I went on a blind date. The circumstances were complicated. This guy had been introduced to me by an enthusiastic colleague. He was okay, not one of those weird blind date types, but I just wasn't feeling it. Over the past 6 months, he repeatedly asked to meet again, but I always turned him down. Until last week, my colleague came to me with an awkward look. Xiaoyang, please, just have one more meal with him. It seems like he really likes you. Sis, no matter how many meals, I won't accept him. I understand, I won't force you. I just want you to reject him in person a little more firmly, so he gives up completely. He's too persistent. All right, I agreed, as a favor to my colleague. On Saturday evening, I met him. I already have a boyfriend, so please don't ask me out again. When did you get one? Recently. He seemed disappointed but accepted it. He said he had a gift for me, an everlasting rose. I didn't want to accept it, so I pushed it back toward him. Just then, I felt a cold gaze from behind. I turned instinctively. Chris was standing there, expressionless, watching us. Chapter 25. Chris practically carried me home. It was summer vacation, and he had moved back into the villa. He threw me onto the bed and dimmed the lights. Without a word, he ripped off the buttons of his white shirt. Sis, who's that guy? My blind date. He paused, his hand tightening with force. My skin, already prone to leaving marks, immediately showed a red imprint on my chest. Did you wear such a short skirt just to meet him? I couldn't help but smile to myself, teasing him. Yes? Chris bit me like he was on a rampage. I endured the storm of emotions. Chris was more intense than ever before. Our intertwined figures cast shadows on the wall, showing the rhythm of our movements. Sweat dripped down from his forehead. Yang, when you look at me, he said, his voice hard. Afterward, he softened, his voice filled with desperation. I'm your good boy now. Don't leave me again, okay? Okay. You won't see him again, right? I wasn't planning to. I explained everything to Chris. He relaxed, his shoulders drooping with relief. No more blind dates, right? I don't plan to go on any more. I gently touched his face, whispering, because I have a boyfriend now. Chris shuddered, his joy evident. You'll let me be your official boyfriend? Yes, I've thought it through. Even if our worlds are different, we can try. A boyfriend with such an outstanding appearance, background, and physicality? I wouldn't pass up the opportunity. Chris, more determined than I was, smiled, his eyes sparkling with promise. Yang Wenyu, don't worry. I'll break down the walls between our two worlds for you. Chapter 26. The next day, we didn't wake up until noon, only stirred by the sound of the doorbell. Chris kissed me on the cheek before reluctantly going to open the door. It was his childhood friend. Damn. His friend stared at the marks on Chris's neck and chest. You have a girlfriend? Yep. Chris puffed out his chest proudly. From now on, I'm different from you single dogs. Man, you're asking for a beating. I came out after changing. Who's here? When his friend saw me, his eyes widened in shock. It's her? Your little tutors? Yep, this is Wen, my girl, Chris said smugly. You told me you wouldn't like her even if every woman in the world disappeared. Silence filled the room. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. His friend awkwardly covered his mouth. I did say that, Chris admitted honestly. But the next second, he raised his hand and slapped himself. Sis, don't be mad. Let me take this slap for you. Chapter 27. Later on, Chris and I went through many seasons together, both growing at a fast pace. We faced all kinds of challenges, but we always had great teamwork. Chris became tougher than his father. He was smarter and, most importantly, he had the support of the Lee family. In the past, he had no ambitions and had cut ties with his grandparents. Now that he wanted to build a career, the Lee family was more than happy to help. With their support, people like Chin Russian were nothing. By the way, Chin Russian went to prison for gambling and womanizing. The other two brothers weren't doing much better. One broke his leg, and the other offended enemies and had to flee abroad. Rumor had it that the three of them met unfortunate ends, all orchestrated by Chris. People in the company feared him, saying he was like an untamable wild beast. As for me, I earned a new nickname, the Beast Tamer. I was Chris's bottom line, his reins. As long as I was there, Chris behaved. Pale, handsome. Chris successfully took over the family business, and with it, he came to me to propose. On our wedding day, we kept it simple. Mrs. Lee's former assistant flew back to China. She hurried. Ly told me, "It's just fate." Her words seemed to contain some meaning, but she was only an accessory to the wedding. In the end, it was Chris who stood by my side. Once again, I was thinking, what if I didn't accept him? I smiled. That was then.